Okay, you are inside of the Go Bar deck right now, looking at something I've been working on, which is this modified lattice bracing that you see here. I could call it a modified double X bracing. It doesn't really matter what you call it, it's just something that I'm excited about right now. What I really want to talk about today is not bracing patterns, but cleaning up glue squeeze out. And as I'm preparing to glue this down, see, this is not all glued down right now. These come right out. Everything is just properly positioned. As I prepare to glue this down, I'm going to demonstrate some tips for cleaning up glue squeeze out, since this is the perfect example with lots of inside corners and just lots of opportunities for teaching these tips and tricks. Oh, and by the way, before we get started, just in case you're wondering what this modified lattice bracing is going to look like in the end, when it's all carved out, it should look something like what you see here. Now before I start gluing, notice how I have a couple things set up here on the bench behind the Go Bar deck. This is all to facilitate the glue squeeze out cleanup process. So let's take a look at what some of these things are. So for a typical glue up, I will grab a glue stick like you see here and the sanding board. If you don't have a sanding board, you could just use a sanding block with sandpaper on it. Sanding board is nice because you have a lot of real estate to sharpen your glue stick across. And that's very important here. So all the glue stick is a piece of offcut. This was an offcut from a fretboard, and you sharpen the edge just like a chisel. So it has a bevel and then a flat side. And just like a chisel, you actually want to sharpen this very well. Don't just swipe it across here. What I see a lot of people do is when they sharpen this, and here I'll kind of show it here. I don't want to totally take the edge off this, but they'll kind of flip it back. They'll have a little bit of follow through in their stroke, and that just completely rounds over and ruins the edge of their glue stick. Rather, what you want to do is just hold this with one hand like this, 2 fingers on the side, other finger up here, sort of centered on that bevel, and then you're registering the bevel flat on the board and just pulling it across. And when I pull it across, as I come to a stop, I come to a complete stop. I don't flick it out at the end. It's very hard for some people not to do that for some reason. It's very hard for people to just come to a complete stop and then pick it up. So really think consciously about that when you're doing it. Don't do one of these. Okay? So it seems like I'm making a big deal out of sharpening this wooden stick, but actually that is what this step right here of just, preparing yourself with a nice sharp stick is what leads to really good squeeze out cleanup. And you really only have to sharpen it well once, and then as you'll see, I just keep this board at the side, so as I'm picking up the glue squeeze out and as this edge dulls just slightly and some glue starts to dry and stick to the edge, I'll just come over here every now and again and place this and drag it across like that, and then go right back to what I was doing to picking up that glue squeeze out. So anyway, you sharpen the bevel, and then I'll also, when I'm cleaning up the glue squeeze out on the edge, I'll also sharpen or run it once across on the flat side, just like you would sharpening any tool, a chisel, say, for example. Now I also have in this tray back here a variety of other glue sticks that I use of different shapes and sizes, just for a lot of specialty cases. There's some interesting shaped ones in here, like this paddle one. But I'm not going to need any of these for what we're doing here. It's a pretty simple process. So I'll mostly just be using this glue stick, but I will also use one other specialty glue stick, which is these glue sticks that I make from old plastic binding scraps. It's great for 2 reasons. One, it's very flexible, so when you're reaching around a lot of clamps or go bars or things like that, you can force it to bend a little bit to get into a tight spot. And also, this one in particular, I've sanded to a skinny point, and that's so I can get this into corners and basically just scrape. It's kind of hard to get this into there, especially with all the go bars in the way, but this, because it comes to such a fine point and because it's this binding material which is just softer, I can reach that in there and scrape, and because it's a bit of a softer material, that plastic, I'm not worried about scraping up that soft cedar with the edge of my sharp ebony stick. Now, one more thing I want to talk about before we get started, and that's glue bottles. Most of you guys are probably using something like this because this is the bottle that the Titebond comes in. And so for the nozzle, you have this long slit. Of course, mine is completely clogged up with glue, but that's besides the point. It's worth it to get yourself a bottle more like this because, as you can see here, this is a nozzle that comes to a point and then has about a 1/16 of an inch hole that the glue comes out. And a bottle like this just really goes a long way towards preventing you from having a lot of squeeze out in the first place, which, you know, prevention is always the best medicine, they say. And so that is true in this case. If you can have less glue squeeze out to begin with, then of course there's less to clean up. So that's always a good thing, right? Go onto eBay or Amazon or something like that and just look up. I think I was searching for glue nozzles when I originally bought these, and I found these bottles. They're not hard to find. If you even type in spare glue bottles or something like that, something like this will probably come up, and just look for something that comes to a sort of fine point like this with about a 1/16 of an inch hole in the top. It's just a better tool for the job than what the glue comes in. Okay, so let's get started. Now, first what I like to do for these lap joints, these are very tight, is I'm just going to pull these out and put a little dot of glue, just a dab, in each joint, just to kind of gap fill any spaces in there. You can hear how tight that is. It's a good thing. Now I'm going to flip this whole thing over, and again, going along the lines of prevention being the best medicine, I'm going to show you how to spread the glue so that you don't put a whopping large amount of glue on there in the first place. And that's the big thing being, don't drizzle the glue on. Rather, let gravity pull the glue down to the tip, like it is right now, and then simply place the tip on the surface and drag it across while squeezing the bottle gently. You're actually controlling how much comes out, rather than if you kind of hover the bottle over it and drizzle it out. It's very hard to control how much you're using. Okay, now I'm going to take my pinky finger, spread all the glue around, and here's the thing, you do want a little bit of squeeze out. You don't want zero squeeze out. I know some people, for whatever reason, get highly competitive over how little squeeze out they can get in their joint, and that type of competition doesn't lead to a good place. I know I'm going to err towards putting a little bit too much glue, and so anywhere where it looks a little dry, I'll just go ahead and add a little more glue, and I'm actually adding a little more than I usually do in any case here, just to give something for us to clean up to make this video more interesting. Okay, so a little side note here, these blocks, by the way, that I've used to position everything, these are just little bits of scrap wood with double stick tape on them. And I assemble those blocks in place as I'm dry fitting all of the braces. That way, when I go to do this, all I have to do is place it on there. Okay, so now you can see I've got quite a bit of squeeze out here, and I'm just going to use my stick, and I could just kind of sweep the whole stick along this length, but I'd actually push around and kind of smear the glue. So if you don't get greedy with it and you just take a little bit off at a time, it actually comes off nice and clean like that. See, I'm just taking a tiny bit, and that way it doesn't smear. Now notice what I'm doing with my other hand here. It's such small amounts that I don't need to hold a paper towel at my side and wipe the paper towel on it or anything like that. I can just pick it off with my hand and roll it and drop it on the floor. And as I roll it, just for a split second there, it's such a small amount that it kind of tacks up and semi-hardens, and then I just drop it on the floor. Just like that. So there's no need for that paper towel. Now if you find that the glue is sticking to your fingers and making a mess, then that's a good sign that you're actually picking up too much with each pass of the glue stick. See how clean that's coming off? Now like I mentioned before, you always want to take this, and you can't see it right now because the camera's over there, but you can hear that. That's me just giving the stick a single pass on the board, on the bevel side and the back side, and that just sharpens it up again and removes the dried glue. Now as the glue starts to tack up a little bit, say about 2 minutes into the process, it actually becomes easier to remove because it's less viscous. It kind of hardens up a little bit and comes off more cleanly rather than smearing around. Of course, if you're doing this right and just taking a little bit off at a time anyway, that shouldn't even matter. And on a big glue job like this, it doesn't make sense for me to wait 2 minutes for it to tack up because there's so much of it to clean up that I'd risk not being able to get to all of it in time. And like I mentioned before, for cleaning up these inside corners, this binding scrap sharpened to a very fine point, very sharp point, works really well as a pick. And I'm not worried about scraping in there even kind of aggressively because it's made out of that soft plastic material. Nice and clean. And as you can see, using a pretty long glue stick here is great for getting into these hard to reach areas. Now it's really starting to tack up because when I touch these little orbs of glue that are squeezing out along the sides, sometimes you see these small little balls of glue, and those, once they start to tack up, they just pop right off. It actually makes it a lot easier. All done. I think that's pretty clean. What do you think, Mr. Lance? Mr. Lance approves. So it got a little chaotic there. Oh, there's a little bit right there. Got a little chaotic there for a moment. I didn't realize how much work it was really going to be to film and move the camera around and things like that, and also clean up all this squeeze out. So I had to turn off the camera for a moment and finish it all up, but got it all. It's nice and clean. Here, I'm going to bring in the camera closer and you can take a look at this. And so that is how, even despite having this crazy bird cage of go bars everywhere, you can clean up all the glue squeeze out. That way, if you prepare yourself with these glue sticks like this, you can glue without worry. You don't have to try and put on just the right amount of glue so you don't get any glue squeeze out, because using these glue sticks, you are confident that you can tackle whatever squeeze out comes your way. Okay, so now I'm going to add these other two transverse braces onto the bracing pattern here. But since I've already demonstrated the glue squeeze out cleanup there, you don't need to see me do this. And that way I can do this without the stress of managing the camera at the same time. So, thanks for watching, guys. See you later. If you learned something here, please give this video a like and subscribe so you can be notified when I release a new DIY guitar making video every Friday. And if you want to really learn more, take one of my structured online courses at ericschaferguitars.com or register for a hands-on guitar building workshop here with me in Burnville, Pennsylvania.